Let me just introduce our speaker for today. It's my colleague, Dr. Walter Boot. He earned his PhD from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 2007, and then moved straight over to FSU in 2008, where he's been ever since. He's a professor in the Department of Psychology and also our Associate Director for ISL. And he's currently a PI on multiple federally funded grants at FSU, including the Create 5 project, the Enhance project, the APT project, and he has several new grants that will be starting soon. He typically has been conducting research on a variety of topics. They include attention processes, where he got his start. And then we moved him over to the aging side, and he got involved in older driver and pedestrian safety research, how humans perform and learn to master complex tasks, particularly on how age influences perceptual and cognitive abilities that are vital components to those tasks. And specifically, his latest research centers around how technological interventions can improve the well-being and cognitive functioning, hopefully, of older adults. And I have to say with some degree of sadness that this will be Wally's last brown bag as an FSU faculty member, because he's going to be moving to Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City at the start of the new year. Obviously, he's going to be greatly missed by all of us as a wonderful colleague and friend. So I want to remind everybody, if you haven't RSVP'd, please stop to say goodbye to him in person, December 16th, between noon and 5 p.m. at my home, 1325 Peacefield Place. We're also going to be saying goodbye. Perhaps this may be your last chance to see our administrative assistant, Victoria, because she's going to be leaving in the new year, early in the new year, to work still at FSU, but for the Claude Pepper Center on the Claude Pepper Center, period. So this will be kind of a going away event for two people important to the Institute. Let me just end by reminding people of Wally's topic. It's the potential role of virtual and augmented reality in supporting the health, well-being, independence, and quality of life of older people. So take it away, Wally.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it, Neil. So let me just share. Let me make sure I share with sound as well. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics these days is the potential of virtual and augmented reality to support older adults both with and without cognitive impairment. I'm going to show you some research that we've been doing in preparation for some large randomized controlled trials that will be kicking off shortly. So just an outline. First, I'd like to provide a brief definition of what do I mean by extended reality. Extended reality is the term that people are using these days for both augmented and virtual reality. Then I'd like to talk about the potential of this technology to support older adults in different application areas. And also potential pitfalls for technology with older adults using virtual and augmented reality in those application areas. And I'd also like to show you some pilot work that we've been doing to begin to understand whether or not virtual reality and augmented reality can fulfill the potential of helping older adults with and without cognitive impairment. And this is all in preparation for two upcoming randomized controlled trials, the CAST trial and the SERVE trial. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about that. So in terms of extended reality, what do I mean by extended reality? Extended reality is really a catch-all term to cover both augmented reality and virtual reality. Virtual reality typically embodies body tracking and a near-eye 3D display to give users a sense of being immersed in a virtual world. For example, you can see up here a woman who's using a virtual reality headset, and basically they're seeing completely the virtual world. This is in contrast to augmented reality, or AR, which combines real world and computer generated content. And it can actually be used through a headset. Apple's got a new headset that is coming out or is just recently coming out that will allow people to see through the headset essentially and see the real world, but also superimpose virtual elements on top of that. So that's augmented reality. And also you can see simpler versions of augmented reality, for example, here, a smartphone application where you can just take your smartphone, hold it up to the world, and then it can give you directions. It can give you, for example, here, shopping areas that you can frequent. So Google Maps does this in certain cities to provide navigation through augmented reality. And again, a combination of real world and virtual elements. So today, I'll mostly be talking about virtual reality, but also I think we need to think about the potential of augmented reality as well. So I think that virtual reality and augmented reality has tremendous potential for helping many older adults live successfully. Successful longevity is really important. I think virtual and augmented reality can play a role there. We know that many older adults do not meet the required or the recommended minimum in terms of physical fitness, and most of us don't. So it's not just older adults, but most of us don't meet the CDC recommendations for physical fitness. But part of the reason people don't do this is because physical fitness is often boring, adherence is really, really low. But virtual reality and also augmented reality has the potential to provide engaging physical fitness experiences for individuals of all ages. So that is one application that I think that may be important. It can be engaging, it can promote adherence by gamifying exercise and rewarding exercise with a pleasant and fun experience. We also know that many older adults experience social isolation. And we know from the recent Surgeon General's report that social isolation and loneliness have devastating consequences on well-being and quality of life. And many older adults live alone, meaning that they are at risk for social isolation. About 30% of older adults live alone. And also, that puts them at risk for social isolation, and older adults may often experience mobility issues, driving cessation, which makes it harder for them to leave the house. Virtual reality can provide novel opportunities for social connectivity and social support. Cognitive engagement is important as well. We want to, as people age, keep them cognitively engaged and give them fun leisure experiences as well. And again, if you're experiencing mobility issues, if you're in your home and you can't leave very frequently, virtual reality can provide opportunities to engage in leisure activities, to do exploration, view museums, go to museums. So there's a lot of potential for cognitive engagement as well. In addition to these opportunities, I also wanted to mention AR, augmented reality opportunities as well. Many people are exploring augmented reality solutions, for example, for wayfinding and mobility support. So rather than interpreting a map, we can give you, through a pair of glasses, pretty much one-to-one directions of what you're seeing and overlaying on what you're seeing the route that you're supposed to take. So augmented reality is great. It follows classic human factors kind of principles of providing knowledge in the world, giving people knowledge, and rather than have them to remember things and look down at a map and map that onto what they're seeing in the real world, it can make those cognitive processes easy by providing information directly to the individual. So augmented reality has a lot of potential as well. So in general, I think we can think about lots of great possible solutions, but these solutions and the potential of these solutions will only be realized if we include older adults in the design process, that there has to be a user-centered design process to understand how do we develop these virtual and augmented reality solutions that match the needs, abilities, and preferences of older adults. This is kind of the Nielsen kind of design thinking 101 that many people may be familiar with, that talks about design as a process of, first of all, we have to understand what the needs are. We need to do focus group and survey and interview studies when we're developing technologies to support older adults with and without cognitive impairment. After we develop a sense of what the needs are, we need to pilot test and build prototypes to examine older adults' interactions with these systems, do classic usability testing, redesign. So this is a cyclical process when we're designing for older adults. we need to include older adults at all stages of the design process to make sure the potential of these technologies that are developing are able to be attained by as many people as possible. And finally, efficacy testing is important as well. We want to design solutions that are both usable, but also useful to older adults as well. So we need a user-centered design process to incorporate older adults' feedback and have them interact with these systems all along the design process. This is our classic kind of creates model of designing for older adults. It's a kind of a person environment fit model where we have older adults at the center of the design process, and we need to ensure that whatever technology solutions that we're developing, the demands of those technologies don't exceed the capabilities of the older user. So when we're designing technology solutions for older adults, including augmented and virtual reality solutions, we need to consider the needs, preferences, and abilities of older people. And a lot of the research that I'm going to show you today is leading up to efficacy trials, examining if this technology solution can be viable and have the intended outcome. But I'm going to show you some of the initial work, the piloting work that we're doing to start to make sure that the system first incorporates the needs of older adults, their preferences, and usability is also taken care of. So what are the potential barriers specific to, for example, virtual reality for older adults? Well, first of all, like all technologies, there are age-related perceptual and cognitive changes that older adults experience that can result in usability issues. So we need to take that into account. With virtual reality specifically, there's this idea of presence being a critical component of virtual reality interventions and virtual reality solutions. People in the virtual reality literature talk about presence a lot. Presence is basically defined as your sense of being there. So rather than feeling like you're in the real world wearing a headset, your sense that you feel you're in the virtual world interacting with a world other than the physical world that you're in. So your sense of being there. And presence is, it takes cognition, it takes cognitive skills to be able to process your surroundings in the virtual world, build spatial maps, block out distraction from the real world and focus on the virtual world. There are cognitive abilities that are important to presence formation, and presence formation is critical to the success of virtual reality. As we age, we know that cognitive abilities change. An important question is, will older adults feel the same degree of presence or sense of being there in virtual reality environments compared to younger adults? And again, this is important because this is a key aspect of success in virtual reality. Of course, potential barriers also include poor technology design that does not take into account older adults' abilities and capabilities and preferences and needs. Cyber sickness is always a potential challenge with virtual reality. Some people just get sick from being in virtual environments due to the mismatch between kind of vestibular feelings of not moving, but visual information telling you there is motion, and the mismatch between visual and kind of proprioceptive or vestibular information, which causes some people to get sick. And at least in some literatures, like the driving simulator literature, older adults tend to get more cyber sick or simulator sick compared to younger adults. There are also safety challenges as well. If you think about an older adult conducting, if you're doing an intervention at home using virtual reality, there are trip and fall hazards, and older adults may have kind of balance or mobility issues. And when a fall does occur, and basically you're blocking their view of the world, which makes it more likely that someone will bump into or trip over something when a fall does occur, it's much more severe for older adults compared to younger adults. And also there are technology proficiency issues as well, where younger adults tend to be on a variety of technologies more proficient at using technology compared to older adults. So all of these are issues that we need to think about that are potential barriers to the use of virtual and augmented reality to support older adults with and without cognitive impairment. So these issues highlight the need for a systematic, iterative, and user-centered design approach to understand the barriers to the implementation and adoption of XR solutions. So I want to talk first about a pilot study that we did a couple of years ago at this point, looking at usability and presence of older adults and younger adults in virtual reality situations. So I think we can agree that VR holds tremendous potential to support exciting activities, cognitive engagement, and leisure activities, including virtual social interactions. But we want to understand these potential barriers in more detail. Are older adults able to form a sense of presence as much as younger adults? Are there going to be workload and usability issues? And is cyber sickness or simulator sickness going to be a problem? So we did a small usability study funded by the Center for Research and Education on Aging Technology Enhancement, the CREATE Center, where we just looked at 20 younger adults and 20 older adults looked at their experiences with virtual reality across 4 different virtual reality experiences. And we gave them a diverse set of experiences. We had them navigate a virtual reality home, the Steam VR home, interact with objects and navigate that home. We gave them virtual tourism experiences and sightseeing experiences, as you can see in the kind of upper right-hand corner over here. We also tested their reactions to a meditation app called Meditation VR. To get a wide range of different experiences, we also had them play a fairly fast-paced action video game as well called Zurtex. You can see that there. But we wanted to understand older adults and younger adults' experiences with a wide variety of cognitively engaging activities that could be provided through virtual reality. Participants were in these kind of scenarios for about 3 to 5 minutes before moving on to the next one. And we had them rate their experiences and preferences, etc. And surprisingly, in terms of things like presence, and presence again is a key kind of ingredient to successful VR interventions and experiences, we actually found older adults experienced a greater sense of presence compared to younger adults. And this was actually replicated in another recent CREATE VR study using other measures. But I don't think we have to worry about older adults not feeling the same degree of presence compared to younger adults due to changes in perceptual and cognitive ability. Across a variety of different measures, we found that there were few differences in workload and usability for younger and older adults. I show you on the left general presence across the 4 different types of experiences. The black bars are older adults, the gray bars are younger adults. I also show you some usability data as well in terms of how effortful it was to navigate the virtual experience and the headset and the controllers. And we see that different experiences produce different levels of exertion or effort, but no real age differences for younger and older adults. We also found, surprising to us, that older adults experience less simulator or cyber sickness compared to younger adults. And this made us very confused initially because this is not a typical finding. But we actually found a lot of literature supporting that the higher degree of presence that you feel, the lower cyber sickness a person tends to experience. So it makes sense, but we were a bit surprised, but it seems like older adults were having generally good positive experiences. They had high degrees of presence, low kind of workload, and low cyber sickness. So this was one of our first studies to explore VR as a potential way to provide cognitive engagement to older adults. We then moved on to other experiences. This is a pilot study funded by the Enhance Center, which is standing for the Enhance stands for Enhancing Neurocognitive Health Abilities, Networks, and Community Engagement. This is another aging center that Neil and I are a part of that focuses on older adults with cognitive impairment specifically. And this was looking at older adults' experiences with virtual reality and these were older adults both with and without cognitive impairment and with and without a reported physical disability. And in this study, we wanted to look at potential changes in mood that might happen post-VR exposure. And again, a small pilot study, only about 50 participants, no control group at this point, just to kind of get a sense of older adults' general reactions to these types of experiences. And we had older adults engage in a virtual gardening experience, virtual virtual gardening, virtual nature exposure, and a virtual gardening game. And we looked at about 50 older adults, their attitudes towards virtual reality before and after exposure to look at attitudinal barriers. We also looked at changes in mood as well. Here's just kind of an example of one of the older adults who participated in the study and could get a sense of what that experience was like.
So I guess I should, right? We've got daffodils. We've got to have daffodils in the garden. Mm-hmm. Oh, we got a whole bunch of them. All right, and we're going to take them over. I assume this is where they should go. Yep. I don't want to step too close to the garden, but there we go. Now I gotta watch my step and go back, and let's get these guys. Okay. And there we go. Ah, there are my daffodils. Okay, lost track of those guys. Why I like to plant daffodils, right? Come on, give me a guess, guys. Nobody's gonna guess. Oh, we're going out the door. All right, now. Yeah. All right. Put them there. Go ahead. Okay.
Okay, so you got a sense of kind of what the experience was like, and you can tell
So
this participant had a generally positive experience with the VR exposure. It was a fairly complex design. I just want to focus on we gave participants nature videos, interactive virtual garden, and a gardening game. We looked at attitudes towards virtual reality before and after exposure, and we also looked at participants' mood using a multidimensional mood state questionnaire that had people rate their mood from kind of good to bad and calm to nervous. And what we found was that, and in all these graphs, I plot up as good. So good is up. So you see along the good bad dimension, you see along the calm nervous dimension, that post VR exposure in general, older adults had better mood. They felt better after VR exposure. And also we found significant increases in positive attitudes towards virtual reality as well. And that's kind of a common theme I think we see in CREATE, is that you provide people with positive interactions with technology, with support and training, and people's attitudes towards those technologies, they improve. They kind of show increases in positive attitudes towards technology. In this study, just again, a pilot study, most participants indicated that the system was easy to use and intuitive and easy to learn, that the environment was relaxing, pleasant, and also usability scores were high. We also looked at cyber sickness again. We used the simulator sickness questionnaire, and you can see that on the left, people have to rate 16 different symptoms of cyber sickness or simulator sickness, from none to slight to moderate to severe. Each of these, if you said, well, slight, that would be on one of those, 1 point. If you said moderate, that would be 2. If you said severe, that would be 3. You add those all 16 questions up at the end, and you get kind of the average simulator sickness. And the cyber sickness score was quite low. It was 2.7, meaning that they might have said slight on 2 or 3 items. But for the most part, simulator sickness or cyber sickness was exceedingly low. And people also recommend now doing simulator sickness measures or cyber sickness measures before the VR exposure too, because some of what you might just be picking up is just general. People are fatigued even outside of the virtual reality exposure. So in terms of cyber sickness, it was quite low, consistent with the previous pilot study I presented. And cyber sickness did not differ as a function of MCI, mild cognitive impairment, or disability status. And also these positive attitude shifts and these difference or the kind of increases in mood, again, didn't change as a function or didn't differ as a function of MCI status or disability status. Again, 50 participants, a smallish pilot study, but still pretty positive results. Another potential that we can think about for virtual reality is providing social connectivity. to provide opportunities for people who are even distally located, even if they're distally located, to have meaningful social interactions, and social interactions that will be positive. Again, for older adults who might be at risk for isolation, who may have mobility issues that keep them from leaving the house very often, who may have live in rural communities and have ceased driving. This would be an opportunity for older adults with mild cognitive impairment or without mild cognitive impairment to meet other people and have positive interactions. So in this small social connectivity pilot study, there are 3 different sites. There's Florida State University in Tallahassee, there is Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and also Weill Cornell Medicine in New York City. And what we did in the social connectivity study is that we paired older adults at these different sites. And even though they were distally located, we co-located them in the same virtual environment. And this study was largely trying to figure out, would this be a positive social interaction? Do people want to meet people virtually in these virtual environments? And do they consider that to be a meaningful social experience? And that's just an initial study that we kind of conducted. Again, a small pilot study. We only had 36 people in the study, or 18 dyads, across all 3 combinations of different sites, from Cornell to Weill Cornell, from Cornell to Florida State to Weill Cornell. And we had people engaging in these virtual social interactions. So the way it worked is, initially, if you can see in this B section labeled B, older adults were co-located, even though they're in these different locations. Physically, they were co-located in the same room. And then they saw a map and they had to negotiate, where do they want to visit? What sightseeing experience would you want? After they negotiated that, they chose a sightseeing location. They went into that location. It could be Paris, it could be Italy, it could be a variety of different locations where they could have gone. And then afterwards, they kind of built a museum experience, a museum kind of show using pictures from that virtual reality experience. They created their own virtual museum exhibit. I'll just show you kind of what that, there's no sound with this one, but kind of what that looked like, where one participant could see the other participant. They had avatars, and they could do these virtual tours. I think this is a tour of Italy right now. And they also took a hot air balloon ride. And this is kind of an example of what that would look like. And again, you can see kind of the avatar of the other person. They can communicate. They can see each other visually, but they can also talk to one another as well. And then they went into a museum space and then used photographs of their experience and created a museum exhibit. So there's some degree of productive engagement there as well. And what we found was some preliminary mood results that we didn't find as large shifts in terms of mood as the previous study, but we did find at least one significant. Participants felt more calm after the experience compared to before the experience. In terms of other important outcomes, we had people rate on a range of 1 to 5. How engaging was that experience that you just went through? And the average is about 4, so most people found the experience engaging. We also asked people about the workload from 1 to 7. How much effort, how effortful was that experience that you just engaged in? And you can see a lot of people rated low effort, 1 or 2. The average was about 2.8. So there were a few people who found it extremely effortful, or the workload is extremely high. We also asked people, would you like to reconnect in any way with that person that you just met? So some measure of whether or not they liked the other person on a scale of 1 to 5, and on average, about 3.7. So not bad for a complete stranger, so someone they've never met before, but they did have some positive feelings towards that other person as well. Even though that person was a complete stranger, they had a fun experience together. They kind of liked that person. The workload was low. I think one of the anecdotes I like, it's not a piece of data, but an anecdote of this intervention that I liked was that there was a pair, I think one participant was at Cornell University, one was at Florida State University. they liked each other so much that within the virtual environment, they exchanged email addresses so they could keep in touch after the experiment. So maybe it does seem like there was some meaningful social interactions. But again, this is a pilot study. This is setting us up for the next stages for kind of more rigorous studies with larger sample sizes, control groups that are there to begin to understand efficacy better, and also longer term exposure and home-based interventions to these types of interventions, these types of exposures. So one thing so just before I get into the next stage of things, I just want to say for our Create and Enhance research project so far, we found preliminarily that the presence, a key component of successful VR interventions, was high among older adults. The VR experiences were generally well tolerated and enjoyable. With training and guidance, the systems were generally easy to use. There were positive attitudes increases and mood increases as well after short-term VR exposure. So in general, the VR pilot studies suggest that this is a promising platform for interventions, potentially improve health, well-being, quality of life, and social connections among older adults with and without cognitive impairment. That gave us enough information, I think, to move forward with larger randomized controlled trials that we're about to kick off. And these are going to be more challenging studies because these are going to be home-based studies. There are safety issues and safety challenges with home-based interventions, and also these will be longer-term interventions as well. So one of these studies, let me just also talk about the unresolved issues that we'd like to solve going into the randomized controlled trials. What we need to know, I think, more is the benefits of virtual reality versus augmented reality. We need to know more about social presence and what makes a good social interaction among people within virtual environments. We need to overcome home-based intervention challenges. For example, for a home-based intervention, you're not going to have an experimentalist. You're not going to have an interventionist at the home. How do you support the system setup and also the system use? So instructional support and training are going to be key components of the interventions I'll be telling you about. There are also safety issues in terms of trip and fall hazards with virtual reality headsets that block your view of the environment, which makes it likely that you could fall or bump into things. And also, depending on the model, if it has a cord as well, you could trip over the cord. And also, we want to know more about long-term outcomes. This is going to require large samples, diverse samples, appropriate control groups, and also extended use, followed by a long-term follow-up. So one of the interventions that we're kicking off now is the CAST VR intervention that's part of the Create 5 Center. CAST stands for Cognitive Activity and Social Technology VR. And what we're going to do is build a VR program, a suite of applications designed to support cognitive engagement and social engagement based on the pilot work that I've shown you here. Outcome measures are going to be, first of all, is this feasible as a home-based intervention? Is it going to be acceptable? Will it be tolerable? Will it be acceptable to older people with and without cognitive impairment? And also look at initial efficacy. What is going to be the impact on a variety of psychosocial outcome measures, such as social connectivity, loneliness, quality of life? So it's going to be a large study, about 216 males and females. It's going to be a cross-site study at Weill Cornell, FSU, and UIUC. And what we want to do is have this home-based and extended over at least 2 months. And potentially 3 months. We're still working on final designs of the intervention, but we want to know, is this just a novelty effect of, hey, here's a cool technology and people feel good after it, or are there going to be long-term positive impacts of VR exposure that provides social engagement to older adults and also cognitive engagement as well? The progress to date is that we're working on shaping the system right now. We've done heuristic analyses, classic human factors techniques to evaluate the usability of existing apps out there, specifically considering older adults. So heuristic analysis involves expert evaluators or trained evaluators looking at the usability of existing apps. And we found that some of them are designed really, really well, and some of them aren't really designed very, very well. So there's variability there. And we get a sense of what works and what doesn't work as we move forward with building the system. we've also initiated a user preference study to begin to look at what do older adults want within the CAS system, what types of activities would they find fun, what types of social activities or social connections would they like to make. So we're building the system now based on an iterative user-centered design process across the 3 sites of the CREATE Center. Another intervention I'd like to tell you about that was recently funded just a few months ago, involving myself and Dawn Carr here at Florida State University, Dr. Sarah Zaja at Weill Cornell Medicine, and Dr. Saleh Kalantari at Cornell University, is the SERVE volunteering intervention for older adults, specifically with cognitive impairment. So what the SERVE intervention will be, it will be a large randomized controlled trial, and it will be a volunteering intervention where older adults without cognitive impairment will use virtual reality to visit older adults with MCI weekly to engage in a variety of different cognitively stimulating activities and socially active activities. So older adults with volunteers will conduct these virtual visits, and we predict that there's going to be, for older adults with mild cognitive impairment, a benefit in terms of well-being, social connectivity, social support, and loneliness. But also there's a large volunteering intervention literature as well, where we predict that this could potentially be beneficial for the volunteer as well, the cognitively healthy volunteer, plus the person with mild cognitive impairment who is the volunteer recipient. We think there are going to be unique benefits to this intervention for both. And it's a fairly complex intervention, as you can see from this diagram, where we'll have older adults with MCI, older adult volunteers who will be randomized either into the SERVE virtual reality intervention or to a Zoom-based control group. And basically, for the people who are in the volunteers will meet monthly or 4 times a month with the volunteer recipient, and they'll engage in a variety of different travel experiences, problem-solving experiences, creative modules, and also nature modules as well. And they'll engage in these together. We'll have analogous or similar content within the Zoom condition as well. And what we're trying to do here is trying to isolate the effect of immersion, of being immersed in the situation, of present in the situation. And then every month, the person with MCI will then get visits from a new volunteer. So there's going to be some continuity where they meet 4 times with the same volunteer, but then the next month they get to meet someone new. So there's variety there in terms of the activities they're engaged in, and also the people they're meeting as well. And we're looking at a variety of psychosocial measures for older adults with and without cognitive impairment, either as the volunteer or the volunteer recipient. So just some concluding remarks in terms of these projects. These large randomized controlled trials will be kicked off fairly soon next year. I just want to kind of conclude by saying these projects, I think, highlight the potential of augmented and virtual reality to support older adults' social connectivity, well-being, cognition. But this is, again, going to require a pretty slow, careful, user-centered design process with pilot studies, with the input of older adults in terms of their preferences and usability all along the way to ensure that there's kind of ease of use of these technologies. And finally, we want to make sure that we're actually making a difference. So after we do the usability testing, after we understand the preferences, after we design the technology, we need to do large-scale efficacy trials to make sure that these technologies are having the intended effect that we want them. And also, I think, thinking carefully about unintended effects as well, or unintended consequences as well. We don't want, for example, virtual social connectivity and virtual social interactions to replace real-world social interactions. We don't want people not to go out of their house if they can. We don't want people not to have face-to-face meetings with people and friends if they can. But we want to use this virtual reality to supplement social connectivity and connections rather than replace them. So this is kind of the overall process that we're using. We're also working with some other teams looking at the potential of these technologies provide physical fitness benefits as well in other projects. But we're all using this careful iterative user-centered design process to ensure that these technologies are both useful to and usable by older adults. So I just want to thank our funding agencies, the National Institute on Aging, for funding a lot of the CREATE work, or all of the CREATE work, and also NIDLR, the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, that's funded the Enhance virtual reality work. And these are kind of some of our collaborators. We have so many students and so many postdocs and so many people working on these projects. I can't acknowledge all of them, but these are some of the my closest collaborators for this virtual reality, these lines of research. So I think we've got a good amount of time for questions. So I'm happy to have any discussion or questions about any of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Wally. Excellent presentation as usual. And again, another reason we're going to miss having you here at FSU. But yeah, let's open it up for questions from people about the work Wally just described.
I'll also take criticisms or ideas or new ideas, anything that people might want to. Yeah, these are all
brainstorming is welcome. In other words, sir.
These are all ongoing projects. These are all these trials. We're in the very early stages, so any kind of feedback would be useful as well.
Okay, Miles has to run, unfortunately, but thank you for the talk. Well, if no one else is going to ask a question, I kind of jump in. So I'm hoping that you're going to get the effects that you anticipate, which is to say you'll do better in the real, well, particularly in that last study, in the VR condition than in the control condition. But what would what would happen, or how would you think about the process if it turned out that Zoom was just as efficacious, had the same efficacy in terms of the outcome variables as, say, the VR experience?
No, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think everything that we've been thinking about is just the presence and the immersion within virtual reality. We think just provides a better experience and a more fun experience and a closer connection to someone, where you could be doing a virtual tour of Paris together and seeing the same things and talking about the same things. We think that there's going to be a bit, but I could be wrong. We could all be wrong, and that's fine too. If Zoom is the better way to go, I think we'd all be happy with that outcome as well, if we're able to use Zoom to push around some of these outcome measures. Ideally, you'd have a third control group that would be different. But I think we're kind of in the process of we have hypotheses. If those hypotheses are wrong, I'm always happy to be wrong and learn something. So it could be, yeah, that Zoom is as good or better. And I think we'll learn something important if that's the case.
Agreed. I mean, that's the whole reason for doing the trials. Other questions people may have, or you can certainly put them in the chat if you'd like to. Well, let me not leave the airtime totally unfilled. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Can I ask a question that isn't, I apologize, that isn't strictly speaking about the VR, but since you're here and
Absolutely.
Okay, because I feel like I keep finding out the answer to this and then losing track of it, and I'm not sure why. So what for older adults who express a preference for spending time alone, who actively seek that mode and would prefer not to be disturbed, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Are there other compelling reasons to try to force them to socialize with other people, either virtually or in real life? Like, do they need to be encouraged to interact with others in spite of themselves? Or is the desire to be alone to be respected? What's best in terms of outcomes?
I think, I think you raise a really important point, is that social isolation and loneliness are two separate things. Someone could have zero social connections and not feel lonely. And that's fine. I mean, if they're not, I mean, you don't want someone to be completely cut off from the world, because there's kind of opportunities for resource access and other things that are kind of, it's just good to be around other people, for them for everyone to kind of be able to turn to someone if you need help. But I think you're completely right that there are big individual differences, that some people are happier alone, and they could be socially isolated but don't feel lonely. But then the flip side of that is that you could have a million people around you. You could be very, very active in your community and still feel lonely. So even though these things can be often highly correlated, they're not they're not the same construct. These are related, correlated, but not. So I think you raise an important point. And I think that these interventions, I don't know if I have a very good kind of answer to your question specifically, but I think these interventions need to recognize that what's good for one person is not always good for another person, that you have to take into account those individual differences, and think about what are you really trying to change. And yeah, I mean, giving for someone, giving people additional people to talk to, that may not decrease loneliness. On average, I mean, for the people who are craving that, it will kind of decrease loneliness. But for some people, that might not work. So I don't know if a really good answer to your question, but I think you do kind of hit the nail on the head of this very important difference between social isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, and because I've seen people, obviously that difference is clear, and I love that. I feel like at some point somebody told me they had findings that showed that even for people who did not experience loneliness, that just the social isolation by itself, even if it was their preferred state, led to a decrease in outcomes. But it may have been, as you said, that may be it may be a resource issue, right?
Yeah.
The other things. Part of this is because I think it's an interesting research question. I'm not going to lie. Part of it is a fear of people bothering me when I'm old.
Yeah.
Right. That there are going to be people sort of harassing me to try to get me to talk to other humans. And I'm going to be like, look, I did my time. Like,
Yeah.
so there's a personal and a macro issue there. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wally, just to kind of follow up on that question a little bit, since Michelle raised it, are there any studies yet that look at, for instance, personality, introversion, extroversion as a potential moderator for the efficacy of, I won't say necessarily VR or AR interventions, but for interventions hoping to foster better social connectivity?
Yeah, I don't know of I can't point to a study specifically, but I'm assuming Antonio might know, and Antonio's on the call. He's raising his hand as well. But it does make sense that those individual differences, if you're an introvert, I'm fairly introverted. So it's actually, yes, stressful for me to be in like with too many people around. But yeah, Antonio.
No, I don't know anything about that. Sorry. I raise my hands more to ask about, but I assume too there are differences, individual differences, absolutely. But I had another question about how, what do we know about this VR, this technology with people with MCI or early dementia? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we were doing some of the earliest studies, I think, with MCI. I mean, I think the study, this is a really interesting time to be in this technology because the technology is now good enough and cheap enough that people are beginning to do these types of things. Even 10 years ago, the technology really wasn't good, as good as it is today, and was really, really expensive as well, and difficult. So I think we're going to see a lot of that for sure. And I certainly see a lot of people beginning to move into that area. Dementia specifically, I mean, you begin to see some studies looking at in care facilities of providing virtual reality to provide entertainment, and some early studies looking at social kind of opportunities as well. There isn't a ton in this literature, and I think with dementia, I think there's an interesting kind of ethical kind of questions as well of kind of at what point will someone maybe be their cognitive impairment is so far that there may be some confusion rather than having a pleasant experience going to these virtual environments. There may be confusion about kind of these experiences as well if you're not quite kind of sure what's going on, what's real and what's not. So I think a lot of people are dabbling around MCI or at this point just as a good entry point to get in this. I'm not seeing a lot with dementia just yet.
It's very interesting. It's for this, it's so new and so interesting. Yes. look forward to learn more from what work you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're looking forward, to see. I mean, these large randomized controlled trials will begin to, look at whether or not the technology is. I'm actually a big fan of VR. I use virtual reality myself, and I've kind of use it for social purposes as well. That the VR social kind of meetups, but I think it is a technology that is now advanced enough, and I think it's just getting better and better all the time, that you can now begin to provide some real meaningful social interactions and cognitive engagement, and also productive engagement as well, that we're exploring applications where people can paint and people can sculpt and people can do all sorts of things and create music that I think would be interesting, and kind of taps this idea of productive engagement as a critical component of successful longevity.
Other questions for Wally?
I think that's it then.
If not, then we'll let everybody out a little bit early today. Thank you again, Wally. Sorry to see you go. I'm sure we will continue to have contact with you, though.
Absolutely.
You've got a grant that involves people here, and good luck in your latest ventures. Also, we'll say a little premature farewell to Victoria, who will be leaving the Institute starting in early January. She's been just a wonderful, wonderful resource for our Institute. We're going to miss her, and thank you so much for everything you've done for us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all for having me, and I'm sure I'll see you all around.
Okay, thanks again, and hope everybody has a great holiday season. If you haven't RSVP'd and you want to say goodbye to Wally in person, please contact me, and we'll look forward to a non-virtual send-off for Wally on December 16th. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.